All right. Well, thank you very much. Net zero churches began in January past, if you can imagine. And we currently have 10 Anglican dioceses involved, but we've been building this from the beginning as an ecumenical and an interfaith proposal because there's nothing uh, religious about greenhouse gases. We want to make sure that all faith communities are starting to lead the way towards going zero for greenhouse gases. And you'll notice that you will notice in what I'm going to say to you that our focus is extremely narrow. We're only looking at mechanical systems in buildings. We're not solving the whole of the building envelope problem. We're not solving the whole of the use of transport or the use of food, food services inside buildings, none of that. We're simply saying we have a climate crisis. The essence of the crisis is greenhouse gases. Let's take those all out. And so, in the essential answer for solving that problem is to electrify, to change our systems from being fossil fuel based to being electric. And now that's not perfect. For example, Nova Scotia or Saskatchewan or Alberta currently, if you move to an electric system, that will be probably as polluting or more polluting than putting in a natural gas system for the very short term. However, we know that's going to change. We know that there's federal legislation that's going to make it possible, make it mandatory that every provincial electrical system first get rid of coal and second become net zero by 2035. So electrifying is the system, is the answer. Uh, but I'm in Quebec, and most of our buildings are electrically heated, especially our houses, but they're heated with baseboards. Unfortunately, that is a less efficient, well, no, let me say it the other way around. Fortunately, that relatively efficient system is being made much more efficient using things like air source heat pumps and geothermal energy. And so we're helping congregations look at uh, what does their heating cost in terms of greenhouse gases and dollars, because this year particularly we've seen the price of fossil fuels spike. Can we both save money and save the environment at the same time? And so catch those two kinds of people, those who are really concerned about the environment and those who are really concerned about dollars. And we're keeping a very simple focus on what can each congregation do to reduce their greenhouse gases. We've organized this on a regional basis. So in the Anglican system, we work diocese by diocese. That will work with Catholics, with Lutherans. It'll work with the Christian Missionary Alliance, who are organized regionally. It will work with certain other religious groups. It will have some difficulty with independent congregational churches. And so we would be looking to help them group together. And the reason we do this, the reason we work on a diocese or regional basis is because I've observed that most of the green organizations are trying to sell to congregations one at a time. Frankly, we've seen that doesn't work. It's too hard to get to individual congregations. But if we look at the policy level for dioceses and regions, we can ask the question, okay, Diocese of Montreal, what's your general rule for any renovation? Does it say that any renovation has to make your building more green? It should. If do you have a policy like the Diocese of Niagara around Hamilton has that says within 5 years, all of our congregations have to have reduced their greenhouse emissions by 10%. Now, 10% is a ridiculously low figure, but the fact of the matter is, it's woken everybody up in that diocese so that 14 of their congregations came to their committee to say, what are our greenhouse gases? How could we cut that? And so immediately we're at a spot where we can help them to think about moving forward. We heard earlier this morning about the United Church's commitment that by 2030, all of their buildings will be down to 80% of the greenhouse gas emissions that they had before, if I remember the year correctly. That's wonderful. That brings people forward. And my suggestion is that if every region or diocese has that sort of a policy in place, we'll get 10% of their congregations every year coming forward. And we can equip a regional or diocesan coordinator, a person or a small team who knows what the issues are in that geography. Regina's electricity costs are different from Quebec's. Your winters are different. Your summers are different. The kind of equipment providers who are available are different. The kind of solar options you have are different. Now, just a minute, I said before that we're only going to look at mechanical systems. Well, in some provinces where your electrical system is really dirty and where your incentives are structured well enough, it might be possible to put in both solar and an air source heat pump or a geothermal pump and use the one to feed the other, so that instead of being a dirty system based on the electrical grid of that province, it's a perfectly clean system, and you get to offset your costs based on the electricity rate. So our basic process is to do an assessment of the energy usage of a congregation, do a quick tour with a fairly long checklist, frankly, of the building, but that checklist gives us the installation date of their furnaces and it does a quick review of what are the stoves that are used. Are they natural gas or propane instead of electricity? And that, of course, won't work in a camp where you have to feed 150 people, but it does work in most churches where they have a couple of stoves going. And then we help them look at getting quotes for putting in an air source heat pump or geothermal, and then offer it out to the congregation. Now, we know that geothermal is much more expensive than an air source heat pump, but if we don't ask the congregation, we'll never know that there were one or two people who had perhaps extra money or extra commitment, and they would want to give those cornerstone donations to make it possible to go for the very best, which would be, in most cases, geothermal. We provide support to the local diocesan coordinator who provides support to each of those congregations. So that's the concept of net zero churches. It's entirely volunteer run. We need very little money to make this happen. We need some money. We're going to have to apply for some grants to improve our software, but it's something that seems to be rolling out quite well. And we're in conversations right now with Catholics, with Lutherans. We're well established with the Anglicans, and we need help to get to the rest of the other congregations. Oh, with some Muslim groups. So that's the concept. Very narrow focus, but very action oriented. And we think that this is financially feasible. And we need to know if there's some province where you can't save enough money to make this work over 10 years, that would be helpful to know about. So I'm sure that's the end of my time.
All right, thank you so much, Mark. Thanks for jumping in and giving us that whirlwind tour of what you are offering. And I'm sure you'll have questions for Mark, but we're going to save that discussion for a bit later when we consider what resources we have and what we are called to do next. What could it look like if, say, this group decided to try to be one of your regional teams?
If KAIROS Regina decided to be a spearhead group for net zero in Regina and beyond, you would be helping us, you would be helping the faith groups of Canada to get a foothold in Saskatchewan. We don't yet have a diocese or any other regional group who is approaching their networks within Saskatchewan. And you would be helping to promote a relatively narrow but rapid approach to reducing the risks and the barriers to reducing greenhouse gases. I think we're providing an approach that is able to expand. So to do the sorts of things that Matt talked about, the deep retrofits or the component upgrades in the places where people are wanting to do more. But for those folks who are simply saying, I need to stop talking about this and actually do something, they're the ones who we can help the most by helping them know how to act, how to cut their greenhouse gases, and likely how to save money for the future. And this would help people take an imperfect but rapid response in the context of a crisis that I think people are feeling all across our country, that we're in a climate crisis. What am I supposed to do about this? And to do something and feel like they've actually accomplished something. And so we'd be looking to build new contacts through you with other networks, whether that would be dioceses or a church regional grouping or a clericus of evangelical churches in Regina. Maybe you can provide an entry into that. And those would be some of the participating groups. Or maybe you know the Muslims of Saskatchewan and they'd like to get involved. Or the Hindu Association of Saskatchewan or of Western Canada, and they'd like to get involved.